You and I have known each other for a long time, but I don't know that all of our readers are familiar with your complete background. So maybe you could bring us up to date on your background and what brought you to where you are today.
Sure. My family moved to Cleveland when I was 10 years old, and my mother said to me, "You fell in love with Cleveland right away." And I was 10 years old as a kid, and so my first job in the city of Cleveland was actually selling ice cream. I sold it out of the arcade, which was a thrill for a 16-year-old kid. First of all, to have a key to the back of the arcade, which I never abused, but I did have my ice cream cart there, and I'd take it out on Public Square, East 9th, what we used to, what's now Perk Plaza. We used to head out there, and then I got smart and I took it down to the stadium and used to catch, the baseball fans coming out of the gates, usually after a loss, but they were hungry for ice cream. So I always bring that up because my favorite first job, in Cleveland was actually selling ice cream. Anyways, from that love affair of Cleveland, ended up coming back to graduate school here to study at the Cleveland State Levin College. And I studied city planning under my mentor, a man named Norm Krumholtz, who worked for mayors Carl Stokes, Ralph Perk, and Dennis Kucinich, three very different mayors. But Norm kind of cut his teeth on the idea of equity planning and really planning our cities for those who needed us most. And so he was a early advocate of lower transit fares, of fair share affordable housing through our communities, and really trying to look at life through the lens of helping pick up those, again, who needed us most in life. He was an incredible mentor. I was lucky at one point during a class when I was his graduate assistant to meet Mayor Carl Stokes, who I asked, "Would you have a cup of coffee with me, Mayor?" And Mayor Stokes, lo and behold, who was actually transitioning to his job as ambassador of Seychelles, he was home for a few weeks prior to that. He said, "Sure." And so I had coffee with the legendary Mayor Carl Stokes. It was at the end of my graduate school experience, and the half-hour coffee with Carl, as I call it, changed my life as well. Carl said he thought of this town. It's a great town, but change comes in inches in this town. And I listened to that in my head. It motivates me and it haunts me. And I keep thinking that we've got to move this town faster. And it's motivated me in public service and my nonprofit service. Professionally, I left graduate school, and Norm Krumholtz said to me, "A planner's job isn't always behind the desk. Get out, do your work out in the community." I worked for the county commissioners in the good days, as I say, in the 90s. And I was working on some, really the Workforce Reconciliation Act, which had been thrust upon our county and all the counties in the nation out of Washington. We were trying to help people get back into work. And so I worked specifically on things like workforce training, daycare, flattening those barriers, transportation, and then ultimately worked with employers to meet their needs in terms of what they needed to help bring more persons into the workfold. I had one day when I was off to a meeting that I thought was going to happen with Mayor Michael R. White, but the meeting was canceled because the mayor decided not to run for office again, and he was announcing it at his elementary school the day that I was supposed to be meeting with him about the census. And so I was representing Commissioner Jane Campbell at that time, and I called her and I said, "My meeting with Mayor White is off, but hey, if you decide to run for mayor, I'd love to work with you." So I ran her campaign for office in 2001, and she became in 2002 the first female mayor of the city of Cleveland. And I probably served as her planning director. I was lucky to work on then the waterfront district plan, among other things, but the idea of connecting our community to our waterfront, which I still hold dear as a opportune moment all these years later. We did see a lot of progress with the metro parks since we left office. But I spent my last 16 years after a great term at City Hall as the president of University Circle Incorporated. We worked with our education, medical, arts, and cultural institutions, but we also worked to continue to build a neighborhood. And I felt very proud after having left there that we grew to 10,000 residents, 50,000 jobs, 2,500 new units of housing and renovated housing, maintenance of balance of affordable housing. We instituted new transportation systems there. And we really most proudly worked with kids, 10,000 kids on any given year to onboard kids into experiential learning opportunities and job opportunities. I was excited to work with. At the base of those 10,000 were pre-K through eighth graders, but we worked with scores of high school students on job readiness and youth mentoring programs. Those are the kinds of things that don't get talked about as much as some of our other programs, but are really meaningful. Lastly, I'll close out on a fun thing we did. We ran a summer concert series called Waitable Wednesdays, which you're familiar with, Thomas. And we did that for 16 years that I was there, and kind of brought it to a nighttime scene. And that nighttime scene became more than a concert series. It was really about community development and people getting to know one another from across neighborhoods and communities. I smile a lot when I talk about it because we showcased great local bands, but it was also about just people having fun here in Cleveland, and really the best of Cleveland sort of shined on that night when a diverse group of people came together for concerts in the Music City, USA, and had a lot of fun. So that's where I've spent my last, 25 years, from county to city to University Circle, and now aspiring to be an ex-county exec.
You know, I feel, and a lot of people feel, there's been a really stunning lack of leadership in our region for a very long time. And you've had the challenge of working at University Circle with some of the largest institutions in the region, which hasn't always been easy, I'm sure. And now there's been a changing of the guard, really, in this region, with a lot of new leaders coming on board, the Cleveland mayor, foundations, healthcare systems. What can you do to assure our readers that you have what it takes to work with these leaders to make positive change?
Well, you're right on the money with leadership. There's 3 new hospital leaders, 3 new university leaders, a new chamber leader, and a new Center City mayor, and many suburban new mayors. So I'm really excited to see a lot of younger mayors take office in our suburban communities. You need somebody who knows how to collaborate. And I think what I bring to the table is just that. I worked with our anchor institutions, the very large, like our hospitals and universities, to the very small that you may not know as much about, but very important just the same. Groups like the Music Settlement in University Circle, or Maximum Accessible Housing, which helped with persons who needed housing with disabilities and mobility challenges. I worked with the big and the small to create a community. And I think I always feel that there's testament out there everywhere of the collaborative successes in University Circle. I'll never forget visiting residents at the Transplant House, which was a building that we reconditioned with an organization called Transplant House Cleveland. But residents came for organ transplants. But on a particular evening, I was spending time outdoors. It was a summer night, and people were telling me about how much they appreciated Cleveland, its welcomeness and its welcoming, and University Circle specifically, and how this neighborhood had become their neighborhood. And they were coming for transplant care from all over the world. This is often families that would be donors within the same family to their donee within their family. So they would live together here in University Circle. Those are kind of moments, the vignettes, that made me really proud of the work we did, because we worked together to create a vibrant community scene that everybody enjoyed. And I think that is a testament to why I can do this job. It's about leaders leading with all those aforementioned new leaders, but with organizations like our nonprofits in town. I keep saying this can be the town, given what we've built. You know, and you think about the history of our foundations that developed from the industrial wealth of Cleveland in yesteryear, and how those foundations have built nonprofits who are serving our community. And now it takes a public sector leader to rethink the public-private partnership, and maybe say, added to that is the public nonprofit partnership. I really look forward to working with the many nonprofits around town to get things done. Look, you hit the nail on the head. Will a leader lead collaboratively to see something happen? I looked when I was at University Circle, we built a national network of groups like ours. We traveled to Pittsburgh, Detroit, Columbus, Indianapolis, to name a few. In all of those cities, I think they advanced a little faster than us recently since he reached its lake. Columbus went from Cowtown to Innovation Town with Intel. Pittsburgh doesn't have steel in the name anymore, although we're proud that we have our steel here, but they don't. But they built Google out of the robotics economy and sort of an innovation economy. And, you know, places like Indianapolis that built a sports culture out of the middle of nowhere and have the NCAA. We have one thing that none of them have, the Great Lakes, right? Lake Erie right in front of us. We can build a water economy off of our healthcare economy, off of the greatest cultural district in the world, and off of the greatest metro parks in the country. We can build off the asset base we have and really be next. But it's going to take people who lead outside the silos and connect the dots. I'm looking forward to it.
You know better than anyone that our largest healthcare systems here in this region offer jobs, payroll taxes, and excellent healthcare to our region.
Yeah.
And we're all grateful for that. They also rank near the bottom when it comes to reinvesting in their surrounding communities. And you are also very aware of that, some of which are the poorest in the country. And it's actually, it's almost criminal how little they reinvest. And this is not us talking, this is national rankings. Where do you come down on the call for our nonprofit healthcare systems to make payments in lieu of property taxes that they don't pay because of their nonprofit status? What's your plan for recapturing these millions of tax dollars?
Yeah, you might have read, I proposed it, my Community Health Equity Fund. I proposed it on the backs of the sad stories of the closure of the Bedford Medical Center, the Richmond Heights Medical Center. In the case of Bedford, it's been there a century. There were major losses when those closures occurred. A loss to the community fabric, an anchor that community was built around, both those communities, workforce in the community, but most importantly, patient care. And mayors were left with holes in their budget to the tune, in each case, of $1 million. So I suggested that we create a health equity fund that's akin to a pilot that we've seen in 200 other metro areas. And my proposal was to take our two largest employers that we've given a lot to in terms of workforce training and infrastructure development, and they have given back in the way of unbelievably great patient care. But to your point, we will never be a world-class healthcare city unless we are a world-class community-based healthcare city. So I've asked for the consideration of, off the $114 million in taxable property tax, otherwise taxable, but for the nonprofit status, 35%, which would net 39 million, which would net opportunities to create transportation to doctors and create better access to healthcare. So I'm all in. And I think if we look at this together, we'll see there's a win-win out here when we can all be proud of being the #1 healthcare community, right? Not just healthcare institutions, but a healthcare community with a great, thriving health economy. I'm looking forward to that day. I think we are at the precipice of being a globally renowned water economy, a globally renowned health economy, and a globally renowned manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, where we see onshoring coming back to a place that is steeped in the makerspace of making things in our DNA of our city and region.
Right.
Again, it's how leaders lead. I stepped up on that one. And now we've got the tenuousness of St. V's downtown, which again is a century or more old institution that we need to be very, very thoughtful about how we're going to continue to provide care to those that are most vulnerable, especially in our city core, and how we're going to provide behavioral health services. I was glad Adam's board recently stepped up on that, but this is about sustaining that, because our behavioral health problems aren't going away. And what we are seeing, unfortunately, you can see I'm passionate about this, is we're seeing healthcare follow rooftops like retailers, right? I mean, and what we need to do is shore the core and make sure that our core communities aren't holes in the donut when it comes to things like hospitals or grocery stores, right? And we make sure that we're not crossing that line toward a new kind of redlining that is about vacuousness when it comes to healthcare and nutrition. And so my whole campaign is about health. And I want to work with our hospitals positively so we can look back together and say we built the world-class healthcare city.
As you know, there's a huge controversy over what to do with our outdated and poorly run justice center and jail, which tragically has seen too many people die while in custody. What is your plan for the jail, and how can you be sure that you can pull it off?
Well, one, I am proud to be the candidate who tipped the reporter off that wrote the story about the toxicity of the site at Transport Road off of I-77. That's what experience gives you when you've worked with people for a long enough time, that when you're a former planning director, you got a tip from your old department. Somebody said, we turned that down in the 80s when the state bought the site for what was going to be a state prison, and then they rejected it on the basis of toxicity. So I was proud to be the one who said to the reporter, you got to look at this. She did. Caitlin Durbin, she wrote about it. And I think it started to create the conversation we needed to have in this community, which is, aren't we putting the cart before the horse? And I'm going to take that and run with it. I want to win this election, but if we're lucky to be there, I want to say, look, let's start with a system of justice, not just a jail. What if we disciplined ourselves to build something that was smaller, not larger? This idea of building something bigger than we currently have in capacity, to me, is akin to loosening your belt to deal with obesity. We've got to principally, with principle and with discipline, dedicate ourselves to the why. Why are there more people downtown tonight than there need ever be in the jail? Is it, a stacking court docket? Is it the lack of bail reform? Is it the lack of diversion and a dedicated effort to divert? I think it's probably all of the above. And I want to lean in on a justice system that is just and returns a low-level offender or somebody who didn't even really create the offense and is just waiting for a hearing back to their community, right? And that for those that need to go somewhere else, this was only meant to be a detention facility, right? It was either you return back to your community quickly, not 200 days of stay, or you're off to somewhere else for rehabilitation. But this idea that this jail has become a long-term stay facility for persons across the spectrum of activity, I think is something we really need to fix. I'm about going after care team approaches on community response to incident management when we are in a community where there's an issue. A mental health issue may not be a criminal issue, right? So this idea of how we respond, responders, co-responders, care team response, it's all a system that we can do better with. And one of the reasons I'm running for this office.
Over a decade ago, as you well know, voters threw out the 3 county commissioner system and created the county council in your position that you're running for a county executive. But many problems still remain. And some wonder whether we did the right thing by changing that and not focusing on the real problems. You talk about ending dysfunction in Cuyahoga County government. What dysfunction and corruption do you see, and can you call out, and how will you make a change?
I think I'm the first viable candidate to potentially win, and I'm wanting to win in 18 days, but I think I'm the first person that supported reform to begin with. I'm not sure the last 2 occupants of the office did, nor did my opponent. I supported reform. And I know the charter and I know what the preamble reads. And I think we need to get to it. Economic development, efficiency, collaboration, effective delivery of services. Those are all in the charter preamble, right? So first you need somebody who's dedicated to what we actually voted on and the voters approved. So this is about leadership. And this is about a leader who believes in reform. That's me. And I would say that having participated on that early on in 2009, I believe in what could be. I also believe in the discipline of ongoing charter review, not just even on the cycles that are prescribed out of the charter itself, but even more frequent and robustly than that. We should have a conversation in this community about whether we should or shouldn't have a separately elected sheriff. We should have a conversation about purview of council as it relates to budget. And I think with council, we should be looking at Akron, where I went down to see the Summit County exec last week with Eileen Shapiro, who is a effective county exec 6 years in now, to a system that's been there 40 years. And we should learn from what they're doing in Akron with the county exec system, or what they're doing in Allegheny County. There are places where this works. And just because we've had a little bit of a tripping out of the gates doesn't mean we're not going to have a vibrant future. And again, I hope to be the leader who sort of sees the change that we want.
Another change you're looking for is to create an ombudsman office so the people of the county have a single point to direct them to county resources. Can you elaborate on that just briefly?
Yeah, there are things that we can take from lessons learned in the past. The county system of the latter part of the last century had an ombudsman's office. I think people need to know how to navigate government, and they need to know, if I call, I'm going to get a live voice and they're going to tell me where to go for what I need. The second piece of that is I'd like to take government to the community with neighborhood family service centers in the community like we used to have. So those are 2 premises that I want to take government a little bit out to the people and make sure we're connecting the dots.
You talk about improving health, human services, transportation access, housing for kids, seniors, and families, as well as leveraging our lakefronts, rivers, and parks. These are all services dear to us. It sounds great, but it also sounds expensive, obviously. There's a lot of people here, over 1 million people in this county. How will you do that?
Well, I don't think it is something we can't do. I think it's a doable proposition. Yes, I'm aiming for community health. The idea, there's these places around the world called blue zones where people live into their 90s and 100s at high proportions. The secret sauce is not even such rocket science. Do we have access to fresh food as a first choice, not a distant choice? Do we have walkable communities with sidewalks and infrastructure that befits all ages in the generation? Do we have social hubs? Metro Health says our biggest problem of public health is isolation. We need to create more out there, especially post-pandemic, where people have safe, walking, vibrant communities. And we can do this with our mayors and managers of the 59 communities of Cuyahoga County. I think if we focus on things as simple as not being in food deserts, simple as sidewalks on our streets, things as simple as social hubs for those that are shut in quite a bit of their lives, let's do this.
So related to that, your opponent talks about reducing the size of government and reducing taxes, something we hear over and over again. And of course, government just continues to grow, really, no matter who's in power. How will you do all that you want to do without additional tax revenue?
You focus on realignment, and the idea here is expense neutral. And the idea here is modernize. So when I talk about a housing department, I'm not talking about building a bigger government. I'm just talking about aligning. Right now, housing as an initiative is buried in the Department of Economic Development. We do need a housing czar. We need somebody that's at the helm that is focused on affordable housing and fix-up funds and making sure that our seniors can remain in place and that first-time buyers have access to capital to buy. This is about realignment to modern times. Same with the transportation idea. Advocacy that says, hey, we're going to focus on the final mile after you get off the bus at RTA and how to get to the next stop where there isn't an RTA stop, right? So these are realignment strategies, not bigger government strategies.
Talk a little about your opponent in the county executive race. He has very contrasting views to you on many issues. Can you outline some of the stark differences between yourself and your opponent?
Well, I think that the biggest issue is how we present facts. I'm very much disciplined on the art of science, the actual of facts, not the art of misfacts and misstatements and misconception. I mean, look, to say we're going to freeze property taxes, to say that we're going to cut RETA and cut your income taxes, they're just not things that the county exec unilaterally does, right? I mean, RETA is a state, it's a statewide organization. The case of property taxes, there's a different vehicle I'm presenting, which is go to Columbus and flex out your homestead exemption to make it more accessible to people and with a broader application for income eligibility. But you can't just go out on a palm card and say, I'm going to eliminate RETA and I'm going to freeze your property taxes, because that is disingenuous to the voter. And I believe that that's undermining democracy. And so I'm going to fight for democracy, for facts, for truth in government, and for civility.
Can't argue with that. That sounds awesome. You have received a lot of endorsements from labor, state, federal leaders, mayors. So congratulations. It's quite a remarkable list. Can you tell me briefly what they see in your candidacy and what they like about you?
I appreciate Cool Cleveland too, but I want to say, Thomas, I am very proud of the endorsements. I'm proud of Moms Demand Action, because I've been working with Moms Demand Action on gun violence strategies that we're going to bring forth sensible gun laws and be advocates at the state. I'm proud of Pro-Choice Ohio, because I've already come up with a plan to support women in health as it relates to Cuyahoga County, with a whole lot of substance to that plan. Of course, proud of the print media and digital media endorsements as well. I'm proud of labor endorsements, because I think people realize I'm going to work with people. I'm proud of the Women's Caucus, Stonewall Democrats. I mean, just because this is a person who understands that our community is plural and that we are strong because of the diversity of our community. So I think those endorsements are coming in from a candidate who does support workers, who does support the LGBTQ community, who does support moms and all of us who think that gun violence, enough is enough. And I'm proud that I think our media partners have seen that I have the experience to do the job. So really, really grateful for those endorsements. But the most important endorsement, as we all know, is the endorsement of the people. So I say to anybody out there watching and listening, I work to earn your vote, and I want to work for you.
Well, thank you so much for taking time. I can't imagine how busy you are. Say hi to Natalie and the family for us, and we'll see you back out there on the trail. But good luck to you, and thanks for taking the time.
Thanks,
Chris.
Thomas. And I want to thank you for all you've done all these years and continue to do, to keep Cleveland cool and showcase what's cool about Cleveland, but also just what you've done in the media to keep us engaged.
I
Thank you.
appreciate that. Thank you, Chris. It's Thomas Mulready from Cool Cleveland. Have a great week in Cool Cleveland.